Welcome back to another episode of Digital Gold Dust Podcast. We're delighted to have you with us. So, what we've been creating since the last episode, I guess we've probably both been kind of continuing on projects
Mm.
and things, so nothing super excitingly new. Um, but one thing that we have been working on, which has been really nice and we've been wanting to do for a while, and it's kind of now like the time to get it done, is create our joint sort of brand style guide playbook, which ties in beautifully. I couldn't have timed it better for this episode.
No.
For Limelight. So we've been working really closely in terms of how we bring, obviously we've been doing it in practice, but kind of actually putting it into one wholesome document of really like what clients can take away from working with us in the Limelight context and having kind of everything you need in one lovely guide. So I've actually been excitingly drafting that out, which has been nice to see it kind of coming together.
It is the key, really, to Limelight in that it's that tangible, unique output that we're creating from this offering, I think.
Yeah, yeah, it's very much that um kind of like extension of our work, isn't it? In terms of the
Mm.
client has that long term to really guide them and show them how to implement all the wonderful things that have been created for their brand, from obviously all the visuals, straightforward things like, your color palette, if the fonts that you're using, how to use them, what to do, what not to do, um, through to obviously your logos and things like that, through to that messaging piece, the positioning, the language, um, and really kind of getting used to using your brand voice in that kind of more consistent
Mm.
and aligned way. Um, and I think what kind of keep learning is just how powerful the combined work is,
Mm.
because even uh in my SEO course that I'm doing currently, it came up that, sometimes SEO kind of almost works against copywriting and branding. And I kind of had a little smile on my face, because I was like, well, that is what is so special about what we're doing and how using those together. Because obviously, yes, there will be a balance at times, um, but the fact that we're working together on that means that one doesn't kind of completely obliterate the other.
Mm.
If you're working in silos where someone doesn't actually understand that you've just kind of destroyed, yes, it might get you ranked, but you've just destroyed the personality and taken everything, maybe a bit too generic. And actually, we're kind of mixing that blend,
Mm.
to achieve both and get a balance, which is not always easy. But I think that for me has been such a interesting thing to see come through, and our own little signature blend, I reckon.
So for us, we wanted clients to have a clear way forward to continue the work after we're done. Um, it's, empowerment gets banded around quite a lot, but it is a form of empowerment because we don't want people to go away from the process going, right, cool, I've got all of these documents now, but
Yeah.
what do I
What do I
actually
do?
do with all of it? How do I put this into practice? How do I communicate with my team? How do I communicate with people who are coming into my business more ad hoc? What's going on? I don't have the time for that. So this
Yeah.
is about giving them a resource, an extra team member, really,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
that is going to show how the brand works in practice and in motion. It's going to give them loads of inspiration when they're in a hurry. Um, it's something they can constantly turn to, and it shows the interplay really well between the design and the copy, which does get lost in translation sometimes when you're looking at the two things in isolation, and you can then kind of drift off and end up with things not being aligned anymore. But when you're starting from the brand Bible, brand and word playbook, you can see how things tie together. And I think that better informs what direction you take with campaigns or new offerings or creating a leaflet, for example.
Yeah, it flows into literally everything, every kind of communication you have with your business, whether that's a customer service representative replying to an email, if you're a bigger business, whether it's you creating, your next social media post or writing a blog post or your newsletter, like it literally flows into everything and is, relevant to everything that you do in your business. And to have that security really of approaching those things saying like, right, I know what my colors are, I know what works visually, I know some of those lovely kind of terminology that I'll sprinkle through that brings real life to what you're communicating. It's not just like keeping on brand, it's actually being really engaging.
Mm.
Like I know we're going to kind of go on to talk a little bit about our experiences, with our own brands in this, but like that was massive for me, that I would write something and be like, well, that's really bloody boring, isn't it? And be like, right, okay, and then just having when I had my playbook from you, which was like a complete eye opener to me. I've never had anything like that. It was like, okay, well, I've just, changed that term there, sprinkle that in there, add that in there. That feels more like me. That's consistent with the lovely web copy and everything. And it sounds like a million times better and more engaging because it just brings that personality. And I think we sadly kind of still like dumb ourselves down
Mm.
or slip back into that more kind of corporate, you know, without meaning to, without wanting to, but it creeps back in and you have to really watch it. And that is just such a great kind of reference to be like, okay, that is not what I want to be putting out there. So, okay, let's reword. You just can't underestimate the difference actually that makes.
Mic drop, end of episode.
He's sitting there like a proud mother. That's how it's meant to. Yeah, I mean, literally coming back to like what the whole podcast in a way was created from, and the very title is this shouldn't collect digital dust or any kind of dust. This document, it is not a one and done, lovely, thank you, I'll save that in my drive and forget about it kind of document. This is a living, breathing. I would recommend printing it out, having it on your desk. I have mine next to me. And I literally said to you, and I was like, I literally want to read it every morning to kind of put my collab creative coat on because we're so part of our businesses.
Mm.
And the lines get so blurred between me as Sammy, as a human and me as collab creative. Um, and not that it's, some kind of like weird personality change, but it's amazing how that just kind of brings a different level of confidence. Like you're stepping into your brand and what you want that to portray. And I remember when I first got it, I kept reading it and I was like, I love this business. And I was like, oh, it's my business.
Oh, wait, that's me.
That's me. Um, and actually kind of is quite inspiring for yourself to, because it ties in with all those things of like the mission, the vision, the why. Um, it really is a wholesome guide really of why you have your business. And I think that is so important if you are bringing in a VA, working with other creatives, bringing in other team members, that you can be like, this is what we're about. This is why the business is here. This is the mission. This is, how things should look and feel when we're communicating, but also like getting people to feel part of your story,
Mm.
and actually, don't really know what the word, but yeah, it's kind of them feeling really part of it and doing the best for the business and the customers. And and not just kind of, yeah, not like getting people on board, but you know what I mean? It's like
Yeah,
feeling part, yeah, feeling part of the brand story. Um, and I think that really shows through then when you've got that consistent message, and people actually passionate about what they're doing in their job, and that's fulfilling for them too.
yeah, absolutely. Um, oh, there was a line there that you used about making everyone part of the story, and it's just so lovely. And I think that really is what we're trying to enable more business owners to do at the absolute crux of the matter. Um, the collab branding comes in there with no one swims alone.
Mm, yeah, exactly. And I think particularly maybe for more businesses that are in their earlier days, like it's scary to put yourself out there. You know, there's a lot of clients I work with that are kind of like, yay, got everything. And then they're like terrified when you're kind of like, okay, I mentioned the word launch. They're kind of like, actually got to put myself out there. But it's that very personality and uniqueness that is going to connect with, and we're kind of often, shy away from really showing that. And that doesn't, again, it's about what the brand is rather than, not like necessarily you having to share all your private life or whatever you want to do, but it's about how the brand comes across, but you feeling confident in that and showing that personality and the little quirks and the little things that make it unique, that make it you. And so that's where the kind of the human to human
Mm.
connection really comes in, because it's those little bits of that story that really, really resonate with people. And I'm more aware of it now. And I notice when I decide to buy something, so often it's like, well, I could buy that there. I could buy exactly the same thing over here, but I've bought it here because that business owner has shared their story. I really resonate, something similar, back in my lifetime or whatever. And they're being very genuine and authentic in the way that they communicate. And why wouldn't you want to support that? I feel like I'm on my
Yeah,
soapbox this episode.
good, good. We like a soapbox. There's something that you sort of touched on there. I kind of want to pull out a bit more, and it's that separation between you and your business. Um, Firstly, I think we all have a problem with that. Um, as you well know, at the beginning of my project, and
Oh,
to a
yes.
degree throughout the project, that was a problem for me with my own branding, despite the fact that I know it's a thing. I still struggled with it, and it all the original Pinterest mood board thing was a bit multiple personality, let's say.
Yep.
We had to disentangle the me versus the business. It's a really common problem. So I don't think anyone, if
Yeah.
they
That was a me.
realize they're stuck with it, should be kicking themselves for it, 'cause it's just normal, half of the course. Um, the other thing that kind of springs off from that is the we self-limit. The
Yeah.
business can be big and expansive and bold and brave, where we might pull back and hide a little bit. So having the bold, brave business that has its own kind of entity in life effectively gives us, I suppose, a bit of a buffer, but the courage to do things and a bit of distance to do the things that we wouldn't necessarily do as us, but can do as the business. That makes
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of like it's a version of putting your big girl pants on,
Mm.
which we
Hmm.
referred to quite a lot in your process of like
It didn't we?
the pants came out, not literally. Um,
No, not that much of an oversharer.
yeah. Like Lee, I know you very well, but that's just crossing the line.
Too much.
Um, um, but that's where the whole concept when we were working on yours of like I kept saying
Mm,
to you, is that Lee, Lea, lowercase, or is it L, capital L dot capital E dot capital A? It was like that was my kind of way of like saying to you, is this you or is this next stage evolution of your business, you know, version?
mm,
And so it's that kind of little reminder, isn't it, of stepping into something of like, yeah, no, hang on, I'm here for this, but I just need to remember to not pull back into that. Um, and it's a valuable process to go through. I think that's the
mm,
thing. It's like it's not a bad thing that you have to do that kind of untangling. And I don't think you probably ever, I think that's probably a bit of an ongoing process, like you're going to be kind of being pulled one way or the other. And that's where again having that document as an anchor to kind of pull you back in and step back into it is so helpful. And I think it's you learn a lot through that process about yourself, about your business, where you want it to go, and actually what you need to do in order to achieve
mm.
things. And I think that kind of belief and, as you say, the bigger picture, the bolder thing is where you want to get to, but actually like you need to build the bridge to get there. And so it's sort of part of that process of like, okay, I am really here for this. So it, got to pull on those big old pants.
Yeah. Um, so Alison is an absolutely great example of one of our mutual clients who sort of really kick-started the process of us
Yeah,
formalizing this.
yeah, sure.
Really, she was effectively the inspiration for Limelight because she was the first client that we worked with very much in tandem and helped us refine the process for people getting the most value out of working with two of us together. Um, so I think the thing that came out of the messaging workshop and the deep dive that I did with Alison was how joyful she is and how passionate and excited she is about movement and her unique approach to movement. And through that, we came out with this overarching concept, which was feel good movement. And she now proudly declares herself to be the feel good movement coach. I love that.
Yeah.
Um, but that then led to you crafting the visuals that were not typically yoga and Pilates. They were distinctive and unique for Alison.
Yeah, yeah, it was very, I would say, yeah, instead of it being like a kind of fitness style brand, which is quite recognizable, it was more about the joy that she brings. It's like obviously she is very much her brand and her
Mm,
personality is very much centered the brand. So she's probably someone where actually the kind of Alison versus brand Alison is actually probably the most similar.
mm,
Uh, and it came across very quickly for me of like people are coming to this class because of you. Yes, they're getting all the lovely benefits. Um, and then tying that in with her audience and what they're gonna resonate with. They're not gonna resonate with a kind of harsh, dark gym style look. Um, they're there for feel good movement. And so colors that represent that, some kind of little graphic elements and things that kind of show that flow and how, you're getting into good movement, you're stretching, you're getting stronger, but it's a good strength. It's not, kind of bro strength. Um, really generalizing the fitness industry. I don't mean to do that, but we see it.
yeah.
Um, yeah, so it's one of those things reading through like the work you do with clients, like the mission statements and the ideal clients. Um, and this kind of playbook is, I mean, well, I've always got crazy notes everywhere because it like the visuals just
Mm.
start pinging immediately because it's like, okay, that I can see how that I can visualize that. And as you say, it kind of brings it all together. Um, So yeah, it was really fun to actually have that hook in a
Mm.
way to start the creative process with Alison, because it was like, okay, you've done the digging for me. You've already got the your gold pan out and brought those bits to life, so I could just riff off of those, which was really nice.
Yeah, and it's funny because those bits of gold usually come about through a conversation that includes lots of, I'm sorry, I feel like I'm rambling. Um, Ramble away because it's through that rambling, it's not rambling, but
Yeah.
through that kind of less structured, free flowing, deeper conversation that you probably don't normally have, that we find those little phrases and sentiments and feelings that really encapsulate what your brand is here to do. That if I asked you those questions in a different setting, you would give me a very different answer that wouldn't necessarily generate those things.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's that kind of unconscious.
Mm,
You're not as guarded or trying to think your way through. It's more the feeling and what comes through. And it's, yeah, you're the kind of receptor on the other end, being like antennas up, picking up those things, which is, again, which we've discussed in previous episodes, very hard to do
mm.
yourself, like to see those, that magic and what makes you unique. And you're not gonna, well, some people might, but be like, I have fabulous personality, they're all coming here to me.
I've never met anyone that can do that.
I'd say they're probably not our kind of clients if they do. um and as you say, like it's that process of crystallizing that, um so that people are not dumbing themselves down, they are stepping into what they're really here to achieve, and to help propel them forward into that next stage. And obviously for Alison, she was very much, I mean, obviously we've got the episode of her previously, if anyone hasn't heard that, that's a great episode of where through COVID she really kind of hit that point of like, I need to kind of really rethink my business, who I am, what I'm doing, in order to really kind of move forward and almost like relaunch it in a way, which is
Mm.
what she kind of essentially did. um so yeah, that was a good one. um Obviously we've got our very recent client,
Mm.
Anne, who's a therapist. And do you want to talk about how you came about came ugh, um
The
how the concept
concept.
came about? That's the word I was looking for. I'll go back to sipping my tea.
Get that matcha latte in you.
Mm.
Um, do you know what? It's funny because it actually started with a no, did Anne's concept. Um, it sometimes does, and that's great. I came up with something else initially that worked for where we were going directionally. There was one phrase in it that she was like, that's not me. And then we talked about it some more. Aha,
Mhm.
this idea of cracking shells. So we came up with this concept of Anne as a therapist being the human shell cracker. Um, and it's about people who have built up tough exterior shells to protect themselves from the world, putting those shells to one side and ultimately trying to crack through them, to be fully themselves in the world. And there was lots of other stuff that came through from conversations with Anne, like she wants to live by the sea eventually, and um, all of the kind of exploring that she's done and different things that she's tried work wise. And so it all culminated in her ideal clients and mission statement and planting her flag as the human shellcracker. And then obviously that's loads of fun to play with because there's lots of kind of marine and um, nature-based turns of phrase then that you can weave into things. And then that is some of what inspired the visuals, right?
Yeah, yeah, very much so. And obviously, um, yeah, in my own conversations with Anne, like the nature aspect was very much, but obviously, that could be interpreted in so many different ways. And
Mm,
the idea of like somebody cracking open a shell is seems like quite a violent thing, but actually what we're talking about is something very soft, very gradual, um, very compassionate. It's done in a loving way. It's not in a brutal kind of like expose yourself feeling, raw to the world. It's a gradual, almost like delayering
mm,
of the shell. But it's yeah, that was my thing, was like taking that visual and putting it in the right context, because it, you know, could be taken somewhere completely differently, and making sure that that was aligning with the other lovely things that came through, like with the therapist being like the guide, and you're going through a journey and you're stepping through a doorway. Um, and, having sort of online therapy where actually she comes to you and you can be however you want to be. If you want to be in your PJs, if you want to be off camera, like that's all good. And there was so much richness in there to kind of play with and dot into the visuals. And it came through with the logo, even where the font I chose to work with had this kind of, it had an upward motion, but with the A, it looked like a pathway, and the A created this doorway, and we worked on kind of arch shaped imagery because that again was reflecting the doorway, and tied in beautifully with some of her photography that she happened to be standing, in a doorway. Um, and it's things like that that might not be massively obvious. Obviously, when you
mm.
tell someone, they're like, "Oh yeah, I can see that now." But it's those little kind of things that just run through a brand identity that ties it all together, so that it you don't even think about it, because it is so seamless in that sense. Like nothing's jarring, nothing, well, that doesn't actually quite feel, that feels a bit out of place with what we're talking about here. It's tying it all together and having those little, again, those creative hooks to kind of play off of. Um, is super fun and really rewarding, and I think is such a better outcome for the client, because it
Mm.
really does, you know, um, goes to that deeper level. It's not a trend, it's not a fad, it's not a this is what's happening now. It's like, this is who you are. This is what you're trying to achieve. This is why you're doing what you're doing. And we're just bringing all that goodness from you and just putting it into, kind of visualizing it.
Yeah, it is not just a logo and pretty words. And that I think is part of why we created the brand and word playbook, is again to make it very clear and easy to apply stuff, because it isn't just words and a pretty logo that you're
Yeah.
getting or that you're having to work with moving forwards. And that can feel then sort of enormous and unwieldy when you're thinking, oh, it's not just words and a pretty logo. Now what the heck do I do with that? That's
Yeah.
why these guides are so helpful.
Yeah, because you don't want the client to then feel overwhelmed. Because obviously there is a lot of work and a lot of thought and a lot of care that goes into that process. And you don't want that to then become overwhelming when the client's like, "Oh my God, I'm so scared. I don't want to ruin what you've
Mm,
created. It's so lovely. Um, I don't want to go and butcher it." So it's kind of like, um, practically how you as a business owner who isn't a copywriter, who isn't a designer, can actually continue that confidently, um, and feeling like, they've got everything they need to do it, and understand the why and the how that we got there. Um, yeah, it's that, as I say, it's something that should be, a lovingly well thumbed, slightly tatty document, um, down the line that you'll probably have to reprint at some point because you've used it so much. that's what we want to see.
Yeah, yeah, that's what we're hoping.
Yeah.
So Alison and Anne really informed Limelight, but we kind of, I would say that we put the brand and word playbooks much more into practice and experimented and played a bit more with our own brands first before inflicting them on
Yeah, subjecting our clients. Yeah.
yeah, rather than making our clients the guinea pigs um, of those, we tried them out on each other first. So
Yeah, that was
do
fun.
you want to? You have already touched upon the brand word playbook for you and what it's given you, but do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Um, yeah.
I'm just gonna turn around and go no.
No. Um, trying to think like what I've already said and not to sort of say the same thing again. But um the yeah, the biggest thing I think is having for me, obviously, because I've already got the kind of visuals, so I'm starting from a different point compared to other clients. But so for me, the words were my real struggle. And just feeling quite frustrated that like I'm not getting across what I want to, but I don't actually know how. Um, and just having those bits of language that tie it all together and, as I say, bring that personality through. Like the just the amount of times I've written things that, when you actually kind of look back and that's the process of writing, nobody creates a masterpiece from the first draft, but kind of it just opened my eyes to like how boring stuff was and mundane. And then changing up the language and just you want to inspire people, you don't want people to nod off like um and it can be frustrating when you're not naturally skilled at kind of getting that across. So it was just so easy to dive in and just reread some of my sections of my playbook um to kind of step back into it, because obviously when you're first working with it, it's kind of new in a way, as much as it's still very much come from yourself and the brand, and through those conversations and the strategy side. Putting it into practice is still fairly new, so you want to kind of have that support until it becomes kind of second nature, that you're naturally writing in that.
Yeah, and I think what you said there comes back to something we were saying earlier is your second nature is kind of a safe zone or
Yeah,
comfort zone, which
100%.
is the generally the more holding back, the safer language, the tends to wind up in kind of corporate kind of territory, gets a bit generic. Um, whereas when you have the word playbook, there's a lot more personality in there. And again, it's that permission slip to come out and use language that clearly sets you apart
Yeah,
and shows personality and difference
yes.
and is far from generic.
And with that, I would say it makes it really fun. It's called a playbook, and it is actually quite playful, when you've got those concepts to kind of riff off of, that you can have a bit of a play with it, and um, that makes the whole writing for your business um, far more enjoyable. And you're never starting from a blank page. That was the biggest thing. Like you've always got something concrete to work from. Um, you're not kind of like, oh God, how do I start this? It's like, okay, well, I'm pulling that thread, I'm putting this thread. Oh yeah, that fits with what I'm talking about today. So I'll add that in there. This is how I introduce my newsletter. You just have a little sign off or whatever it might be, um, that starts to become recognizable for your clients, that kind of it that they recognize it's you, and that's what you want with your brand, and that kind of
Mm.
consistency of you applying it in that way is that it's kind of like your stamp. People know, this is a post or a newsletter from Lee or from Sammy because of the way they've worded it. And just making it more interesting for people. It's like the unsubscribe message on your newsletter. Um, it's the fun we have with creating 404 pages, like something that can be quite a standard page is like how can we play with that? How can we bring that personality back through and keep it more engaging and again keep connecting with people. That's what it's all about. Like this isn't giving you an excuse to hide behind a brand. This is you like diving right in and you're in it, you're being it, you're not hiding behind it, you're embodying it.
Yeah. And whilst I don't add, I'm not suggesting we do this, but if you were to say cover up the logo on your email or even send a plain text email, um, it would still be recognizable as you, and people would still get that feeling that you're trying to get across. Because there are going to be places where you can't necessarily always use all of the visual side of stuff. So
Yeah.
whilst we're all about the interplay and the two things are essential together, um, it's making sure that stuff can stand alone and still demonstrate how incredible your business is.
Yeah, and connecting on that more emotional level. Well, I think yours was, I think we should finish off with yours.
Mm,
Um, because as you said, we started with multiple personality Pinterests board, and there
yeah.
was, kind of the tables had to turn a little bit. I was putting my Lee hat on for a while to to pull some of those things out. And um again, I think almost you like needed a bit of a permission slip to step into
Mm,
some of those elements. Like obviously the whiskey side of things were very strong in terms of obviously it's something that you like to indulge in every now and again, and you love the craft of it and the history of it, but it was so visceral, like talking the words that came through talking about your copywriting, the storytelling, the human connection, the empathy, where the words were so enmeshed with that kind of like distilling, because you don't rush things, like you take time, things have to kind of mature slightly. And the crossover was so big, it was like we have to go here, we have to go here, but in a way that was, still had an elegance, was quite powerful. um and then really bringing in, I think, the kind of editorial feel to really like up level it.
mm.
And that was the kind of the putting the big girl pants on moment of like, this is where this is the level now that you need to be, or were at. But we need the brand you had before was way back in, earlier days. Lee's journey, it wasn't reflecting how you work, but there was a little bit of hesitance for you to step into it, if you don't mind me being.
No, I'm pretty open about that.
You published quite a lot on LinkedIn about it, so I feel okay to say it. But um, I think that's what was so beautiful to see, actually, everything coming together. And then again, and then obviously, I think with this one, it was so enmeshed in terms of like the visuals and copy were really coming together at the same time, that we were kind of constantly backwards and forwards, weren't we? Like on a daily basis of inspiration bits and little when you were like, oh, I'm copying that sentence, I'm screenshotting it, and we were going backwards and forwards like that, which obviously we're quite privileged to be able to do, um, to really, yeah, make sure we kind of did it justice in a way of how to pull it all together and make sure it was represented in the right way, and then just bringing nice little bespoke things through of like with your logo and with the L, and then turning that into your little kind of cut glass pattern that's, uniquely you, but taken from some of those elements that then flows through your photography. It's like how, yeah, I think it's sort of it's such a joy like to kind of recap really of like what goes into it and the thought
Mm.
behind it, and not to like toot our own horns too much, but anybody doing kind of that kind of work, um it's nice just to kind of shine a bit of a light on what really goes on behind the scenes to hopefully create something that again feels like quite seamless and effortless in a way because it all comes together so well.
Yeah, definitely. I'd say we probably nearly wore our keyboards out, and poor old Slack got a real hammering through that project. Um, I would say because I didn't have enough distance, despite the fact that I write copy all day, every day,
Mm.
I was struggling with finding the words until we kind of landed on the concept. Um, and the more the visuals progressed, the easier it was for me to craft the words that were going to tell the most compelling and authentic story, really. And it was handy having you there to kind of rein in any more twee or sillier impulses, because it happens every now and then. I can go a little bit too far in one direction. Um, so that was also a really helpful element. And I've ended up with a brand and a website that I'm pretty proud to show off and send people to. I don't cringe about it. I actually, will offer it up. And whilst the website is not complete, that which is on me because I haven't written lots of pages, there's still work to be done on it. But I think that will always be the case. And I think that's another important thing that people really kind of need to take away from it is yes, you can have the visuals and the copy nailed, and you can have your brand guides, but there's still going to be work to do moving forwards. And it's about how you make that as easy and joyful as possible.
Yeah, I mean it's a living, breathing thing, and if you haven't updated your website in a year or two, then you know it's going to look
Mm,
outdated, and it's going to appear that way. And I think there's nothing kind of more off-putting than seeing a business who hasn't bothered to really update anything. So it's important that, yeah, that's like we're not talking about the kind of endless tinkering kind of
mm-mm,
updating.
mm-mm, mm-mm,
We're talking about um informed changes that are relevant and going to support your business in the direction you want it to go. Um, and yeah, like if we all know if we wait for something to be finished, it will never
mm.
see daylight. And obviously that is not, you know, that's not helping anyone. So but yeah, we've got obviously a super solid foundation, as you say. You can share it to the right people, direct them to the right place, and bring value through what you're doing whilst working on things in the background. Same for me, loads of pages I've got to be working on, which I think I've mentioned in many a podcast. Hopefully, by the time this actually airs, I will have made some progress on that. Not hopefully, I will have. This is all our audience can hold me accountable on that. Um, if you're listening, go and check my website and see if those pages have been updated. um, yeah, it's a living, breathing thing.
Yeah, and I think having that solid foundation and that brand identity that is expansive, the big girl pants brand identity, um,
Stretchy, the
allow
pants,
yeah, that
the vision,
that
not sorry.
that gets you thinking about where you want the business to go and what you want to add, so you can launch with what where you're at, knowing that you're going to be adding stuff, which is what we did with mine is
Yeah.
I know there are additional services and things I would like to do um, that will come in, and that website brand identity, core messaging, uh, everything that we've done together enables me to do that without then finding myself stuck or trapped or pigeonholed or
Yeah.
without needing to build another bloody website or create
Yeah.
something else.
Rebranding again because that's now like redundant. Yeah, it's really important that this process and the whole point of this process is to propel you forward, but also to enable that growth
Mm.
and support you in that, and not, as you say, not going to end up with you feeling stuck. It's important, and I asked this in my strategy questionnaire of what is the vision of the next year, 3 years, 5 years. And not that you have to have a clear idea, but it's sort of like if you've got an inkling of what you feel like, what direction you want to go in, or things that you would like to add on, other services or whatever, things you got brewing, then that's great because it's like I want to make sure that what I'm crafting, and particularly with the website, you have the functionality at your fingertips when you need it. You don't need it all now, but actually, is this being built in a way that you can bolt on what you need and allows that business growth and expansion in the way that you want it, without kind of being like, oh heck, this is the wrong platform and that I can't, add that on, and I'm now back to square one. This isn't with me for the long term. This
Mm.
is meant to grow with you.